Hi friends, in this bonus video session we will be talking about offset. Now this is quite often used in financial modeling and this is slightly tricky. In fact, it took me most time to learn this particular formula, but I'll try to make it easy and simple. Let's see. Now I have a data which talks about sales cost profit for the different years. So I have basically a 2x2 matrix data on which we can apply VLOOKUP with match. For just a quick recap, when we used to apply VLOOKUP with match, that is, if I want sales 2008, we could have applied VLOOKUP, look for that value which is given vertically, the one value which is already given as input out here. Now the table array, I have chosen the entire data and I'll press F4, comma, to proceed. Now in the column index number, although I can count 1, 2 and 3 because in the third column lies my data, but let me write a match formula. Now this is something that I've already discussed in the previous video. So this is just a quick recap. So match lookup value talks about that. If you remember junior follows senior, the analogy that we used to use, look up for that value which is given in the header. So that's here, comma, and I must not start choosing from here. It must be junior follows senior. F4, comma, 0, bracket closed. And since this data is not a slab, it's simple sales cost and profit, I'll be using false for an exact match. Now, why did I use VLOOKUP with match? This is just to set the premise with respect to offset. Let's say at this given point in time, I would want to reach sales of 2008, that is 1450, the one that I used match for, VLOOKUP with match for. Let me highlight that particular value. Now, if you were standing on this cell and you would have to reach to the yellow cell, how would you do? You would move one row down and you would jump one column and two columns. So basically one row down and two columns right. So what offset does is it selects a reference, which means your starting point, a cell. It asks you how many rows do you want to move down? I said 1. And how many columns to the right? 2. Now these are two optional scenarios, optional values, which I'll be talking about the next subsequent cases. But as of now, let me close the brackets here and let's see what I get. Offset. Now of course, this you had to feed in the numbers, right? So if I change the number, let's say row number 2, which will point to one row below that, which is 1750, and that's exactly what I get. So offset at a very basic level, it means a starting point chosen and how many rows down or how many columns to the right. A question might arise that if I had chosen the reference as, let's say, not particulars, but let's say 2009, would the answer would have changed? Oh yes. Since the starting point is 2009, so 2 rows down, which means this particular row, and 2 columns right, which means 1700. So now let's see what are the applications of offset. This was a very basic example and let me start the application from case 2. Alright. Now what VLOOKUP with match couldn't do was, it couldn't give you a cumulative set of values. That is, you could have got any one value based on whether it's sales, cost, profit or which year. But let's say if the question says that you would want to have sales for all the years till 2008. Let's say both of them. Now how do you do that? So for cumulative values, I will be using the offset. Let's say at this given point in time, if you were to write a basic sum formula, you would have done something like this. So if somehow I can automate this selection of reference, that is based on how many years has to be taken, I can use sum formula. So to automate this part of the sum formula, that is the selection of the range, I will be using offset along with the 2 extra parameters which I did not discuss in case 1. Let's say at this given point in time, if you were to calculate the total sales from 2007 until 2008, and if you were starting from particulars, where would you start? Counting the numbers from one row below, one column to the right. That means this is my starting point, one row below and one column to the right. And height would be only 1, right? Because you are choosing just these, not these two. So height is 1 and width as I can see clearly, it's 2. Alright. Now if I were to write equal to sum Please note, I'm enclosing the offset formula in sum. Why? Because let's assume if you were to write something like this, would it give an answer? No. This is a common mistake. Hence, let me first enclose that in some formula. So let me write sum and then let me write offset. Alright. Now offset is asked for a reference. How many rows below? 1. How many columns to the right where you must start counting the number? So I'm just placing my cursor till here by using this 1 and 1. And then what is the height that I'm looking at? That is only 1. And what's the width? 2. If I close double brackets, enter, 2850. Let me quickly check. Sum of these two should be 2850. That's correct. Now you would ask me, who is going to count this every time, especially in a big data? Agreed. You would not be counting this 1, 1, 2 and so on. You would be taking the help of the formula match to do the counting. For example, that is, had it been profit in the question, you would have moved how many rows down? 1, 2 and 3, isn't it? How did you count that 3? By counting within this data, the one which is blinking. So that means this particular row selection must be dynamic data which must be counted with the help of match. Now in all these scenarios, since it is asking for a cumulative value, that means from 2007 to 2008, 2007 to 2009 to 2007 to 2010 or 11, it must start from the first column, that is the counting. So this is a static data. I'm just writing a static data which must be fed in by hand. Now the height would remain 1 all throughout, because if it is sales, 1 height. If it is cost, 1 height. If it is profit, 1 height. So again, this is a static data, at least in this case. The width depends on how many years do you want to calculate the summation for. Again, it's a dynamic data and you must use a match formula to automate it. So how did you count that width should be 2? By looking at 2008 and then you counted 1 and 2, isn't it? That means your counting through match will begin from here, from 2007 till 2011. Your counting for sales, cost or profit will begin starting from here, below the particulars. So unlike VLOOKUP with match, there is no junior follow senior. Everybody minds his own business. That is, this minds his own business, this minds his own business. There is no overlap that we witnessed in VLOOKUP with match. So now, if I look at the formula, which part of these I must automate? Let me write the formula here this time. So I say sum, alright, offset. The reference, I'm just keeping this particulars as the one I used before. Now rows, I could have chosen 1 here, but again, I must make this automatic, right? Using match. So let me go back. Let me write a match formula. Now within match formula, let me look up for how many rows below I must start from. So for doing that, let me look up for sales. And then let me count the numeric position of sales. Let me press F4, 0. Now this is just to get the row number from where I must start. So for example, sales, I must go 1 row below particulars. For cost, I must go 2 rows below the particular section. And for profit, I must go 3 rows. So that is exactly what it is counting, the match formula. So we are still in rows. Let me put comma and let me put digit 1. That's a static data that we've already discussed. Putting a comma, I'm being asked for height. Again, let me put 1, which is a static data. But the last one, width, that is not static. For that, let me again use a match formula. So match. And how would I decide what is the width? By looking at how many years total I must require, right? So look up for the year. Start counting the position number. F4, 0, bracket closed. One more bracket closed. So if you are counting 2008 in this green bordered area, you'd get 2, and exactly that is what I want for width 2. So let me close one more bracket and let me press enter and see what I get. Yes, 2850. That's exactly the answer. And the magic is 2009. If I write 4350, it takes a cumulative total for these 3 aspects. If I take, let's say, cost till 2009, So these three numbers add up to 3900 if you simply calculate that. So that's exactly how I learned the offset formula. First, break it down into 4 different components. Do it manually, at least initially, and then see which of them are supposed to be static. If they are not supposed to be static, then use match. And here, junior follows senior, the one that we used in match, VLOOKUP with match doesn't follow. Here, you have to notice based on the reference selection below particulars. Let me go to case 3, and this will solidify the concept of offset. Let's say in this case, the values are given not in terms of sales, cost or profit, but in terms of the different months sales. Okay. And whenever you choose the year 2008 and you choose the month, which means February. So from Jan to Feb, this total should be calculated. Now, had this been, let's say March, then you would have given Jan to March, all the total, that is 4800. Now, how do I do this? Let me press Ctrl Z. So for Feb, I would want to select these 2 array selection for my sum formula. So if I were to do it manually and I would be starting from the reference point months, how would I proceed? For this, you must start from the first row. Why? Because either you calculate only Jan or Jan Feb or Jan Feb March, right? In all these cases, you are starting from the first row, 1 row below the months. Column. Now this column is not static. Why? Because you are jumping ahead based on the year. So if it is, let's say 2007, you would have skipped 1 column and then started counting from here. If it is 2008, you would have jumped 2 columns and then started counting from here. So this is not static. This is dynamic based on match. At least in this case, it is column number 2. Now height is dependent on how many months do you want. If you want 2 months, then it has to be 2. If it is Jan, Feb, March, then the height must be 3. So in this case, it is match which is going to be helping you. Width, in all the cases, it's just 1 based on that year. So that's again static. So if I were to write this using a match formula and offset, let's see how it is moving ahead. So sum, very important that you must write the sum first, then the offset. So let me proceed. Reference is months, comma. How many rows below? I can write 1. That's a static data that we've already discussed, comma. The next is columns, for which I must write match formula. You can also write it this way, that is, you must complete the structure of the formula and then we will fill in the match parameters. So we have talked about reference, we have talked about rows, which is static, we have talked about columns. We'll fill this parameters in some time. Now height again requires another match formula. Let me write MAT and then press tab key, close the brackets, comma. Now width again, which is static. So let me close the brackets once more. So this way, this is how it is supposed to look, and let me now fill in the numbers. So the first match is substituted for what? For columns, right? That means how many columns must you jump to start calculating the result. Now that column jumping exercise, how would you know? Based on the year that is being asked. So if it is 2007, you would jump 1 column. If it is 2008, you would jump 2 column, right? So match, please look up for the year. In this data region, the one that is highlighted, let me press F4, 0. Now if it is 2008, it is supposed to give me the 2, which is correct, 2 column jumping. For the next match, that is for height is dependent on how many months is being asked. So let me count the month, where in this selection, and I press F4, 0. The rest of the brackets are closed appropriately, so let me press enter. So 3200, let's see if that is the case. Yep, that is 3200. If I choose, let's say March, I'm supposed to get 4800. Yes. If I change the year, let's say 2010. Yes. And alternatively, I could have also prepared a data validation list in these 2 cells. So data validation. Just recapitulating from our earlier videos, I must choose a list. Source should be Jan, Feb, March. Alright. In this here as well, data validation, allow a list, and in the source, let me choose the year. Okay. So anytime you choose, the answer is bound to change. The one in yellow and red. Perfect. So apply these techniques. This might seem tricky at the outset, But trust me, this is a very effective formula, especially in financial modeling, where based on the inputs you would want certain values. So hope you enjoyed it.